Hi there, welcome to today's lesson. So my name's Ed and this is my painting channel. So I give art classes every week. I have been since lockdown and also doing some demonstrations, and I also give feedback for people that want to paint along. So we've been doing a series on landscape painting, and you can watch some of my videos from previous weeks. We've talked about composition and design and various bits and pieces, painting trees. So we've had a little half-term break, and now we're going into a sort of stretch which should take us up to the end of July. And I've got various different topics. Hopefully they should all help us, all parts of the puzzle in terms of improving your landscape painting. So I'm hoping some of you will join in. You can find details below if you'd like to get involved with the lessons. Otherwise, just you can tune in every week, and you can also, if you do any painting related to some of the topics I covered, you can always upload them onto Instagram at hashtag #EACTutor, and also see some really great examples of some of my students' work. So I would have a look at that. So we're looking at today. We're looking at landscape photography. Okay, so this is one of these subjects that different people have different views on it. So there's a couple of ways to think about landscape painting or approaching it. And here I'm talking specifically about sort of observational landscape painting, where you're really taking your inspiration or your sort of material from the actual landscape, as opposed to sort of inventing the landscape. So the main approach that I've sort of followed through my sort of artistic career is the act of just going out into nature and trying to work directly from it, either drawing or painting. And as well as that, though, there is also, taking photographs. So I just wanted to talk about both of these ideas. They have their strengths and weaknesses. So if you know the strengths and weaknesses, you can make better use of both of them. Okay. So plein air painting, or painting outdoors on location. Um, the great thing about that is you are immersed, you're creating your artwork whilst being immersed in the location. And it's difficult to say exactly what happens, but I have this feeling often that something of the experience of being in nature gets communicated into your artwork. It just has a different mood or a different atmosphere than you might get from working at a studio or in the classroom. So that's it to its advantage. Another thing is that you can work, well, you have to work quite quickly. And for some of our, for sort of contemporary art and what we're used to seeing, people like to see these sort of quick, intuitive sort of mark making. And that mark making really comes out of a direct response to nature. So it's very difficult to sort of fake that in the studio. So that's another advantage. As I say, you have to work quickly, and that can produce more interesting, spontaneous results. It helps you to bypass the tendency um, to sort of fuss over things. You have to be quite quick, simple, make a simple statement. So it's very good in terms of building your foundation as an artist. But as it happens, not everyone likes to go outside and paint. Certainly, it can be a bit of a hassle getting all the right gear. And when you go out there, there are other things. The light changes. Um, Especially if you've got clouds in the sky, they'll be there one minute, gone the next. Um, Say the lighting, if you've got the sun at your back, that's going to hit your canvas, so you could use an umbrella, but then you get slightly bluer tints, and so there are problems like that. Um, Also, I mean, I find being outdoors, it's very bright. There's a lot more ambient light than you would get in your studio. As a result, you can often paint a bit dark. So that's another disadvantage. So there are basically strengths and weaknesses to it. But this week we're going to be talking about working from photographs. So working from photographs also has strengths and weaknesses, and it shouldn't be sort of rejected. There are some really good things that can come out of working from photographs. So some of the advantages are time. So you can go out into nature and you can take lots of photographs in a relatively short space of time. When you're working with very fleeting effects of nature, this is like excellent. You can capture things that you would probably not be able to record if you were painting directly from nature. So you often see things like when clouds, the sun breaks through clouds, and you get almost like little spotlights moving across the landscape. Things like that, you know, you would have to make a mental note, whereas your camera can capture that for you. When you take your photography back to the studio or at home, you have a lot more time to respond to it, to paint from it. So you can really analyze it, take it apart. I'm going to show you some of the things I do to sort of tweak it, tweak photographs in Photoshop to try and improve them for painting. So it gives you the time to slow down. So often we like to work a bit faster and be brisk, but sometimes also it's good to slow down and to try to sort of push your accuracy, color matching, you know, designing a canvas. All of these things you can approach them in a more sort of meticulous manner. So it's great in that respect. The other things photography is very good at is it's good at capturing details. Certainly when I'm out here in Suffolk, things like, you know, particular trees, tree stumps, the way the light hits the bark, the effects of light on fields, sort of subtle things. You're going to be able to get them in the camera and record them, and that's going to really, if you can get some of those details into your painting, that could really help bring it to life. So we got details, we can capture fleeting effects. So those are some of the advantages. Disadvantages. One of them is that the camera tends to it will distort your image slightly. In terms of color, often you will take a photograph outdoors, you bring it home, put it on your computer, and somehow it doesn't look quite like it did when you were out there. And you think, well, it's a camera, it should be, you know, recording it accurately. But cameras have sort of quirks in terms of the way they expose the sky, things which our eye is doing and our brain's doing, like adjusting for contrast and that. But the camera, it will struggle. So for example, if you expose for the sky, you'll see all the colours in the sky, but the land will often have to be brought down tonally and can sometimes go black, as some of the photographs I took yesterday will show you. If you want colour in the landscape, in the trees, often that can mean that the sky becomes washed out. So there are various tricks on modern cameras you can do to sort of combat that. But you are going to get these distortions, and often in a way that sort of somehow strips the magic out of a scene. So you have to, as an artist, you have to be prepared to just use your photography as a starting point. Okay, so what I'm trying to advocate here is not to become like basically a photocopier and just simply transfer a photograph and try and match it as exactly as possible. you need to always be willing to edit it, change it, use that material to tell a story, okay, to your viewer. That's really what you need to be doing. And so you need to sort of you need to edit, and some things are going to help and some things aren't. It's also useful to make notes or to try to bring to mind, you know, what you liked about a scene, and that can also inform your use of photography. So those are a few things to be aware of. They're sort of pitfalls. It's one of the things when I was at school, I was always told not to work from photographs. And of course, you know, as it turns out, there are loads of artists and lots of them work from photographs. It's just knowing how to use them. And I was talking with some of my students today, and one of the problems in particular is if you're developing as an artist, you're trying to develop this right side of the brain. And the right side of the brain is very good at seeing how things relate, how parts relate to a whole. The left brain likes to get into detail and see separate things crisply. So if you are, if you haven't made that change in the way you approach your art, if you use photography, it might just accentuate the problem, because you've got that time to do the house, do the tree, do the path, and treat everything separately. Whereas really you need to be training yourself initially to try and see the thing as a whole. Okay. So if you're aware of those things, it might help you avoid making some of those, avoid some of those pitfalls. Okay. So a few sort of technical points. So my first suggestion is, first of all, plan what you're going to do. So one approach is just have your camera on at you all times. Okay. Then if you see something you like, you can get it out, take a few photographs. That's something I've done in the past, but with mixed results. Okay. I think there's something to be said for actually planning out a photo shoot. And I actually, as to sort of run through this, did this last night myself. Okay. So I'm going to go over some of the things that are useful. So one of the things to ask yourself is, what are you collecting images for? Are you hoping to do a single painting? Or are you perhaps trying to create a series? You know, is there a theme? Maybe you've got an exhibition on and you're trying to create a whole sort of body of work along a certain subject. Or maybe you've got a commission and someone's asked you, I'd really like you to do a painting of, you know, Nacton Shores or something like that. So have that in mind, at least even if it's just in the background, because it might help inform like how much reference you take, and it may involve making several trips. So you always have to be sort of willing to do that. Then you might, before you go out, you might reflect on the sorts of things that you're after. So one thing's quite good to do is, if you look through artists' work who you like, make a note of what the actual painting is. Okay, it might be a bit obvious, like it might be a group of boats on a beach with a stormy sky and some seagulls in the air. Okay, but actually, if you just say what the scene contains, it can sort of help you, because you might think, well, I'm not sure what to paint. But if you look at paintings and summarize them that way, I think that can help you when you go out and paint from on location, or you go out to get reference material. Because one of the things you're going to struggle with, as I've done, is nature very rarely presents itself in a way that just makes it instantly good for a painting. So you will often get overwhelmed by detail. There'll be so much that you won't really know what to pick out. Okay, so having a few ideas before you go out might help that process. Okay, so you're looking to simplify what's there in front of you. So yeah, make some notes, maybe pick a theme, and then once you've decided your theme, say for example, I might have thought of boats on the river as a good one around here. Then you're going to try and pick out some locations, okay? So what I quite like to do, this is what I did recently, is I found the Suffolk Wildlife Trust and I downloaded one of their brochures and just made a note of all the sort of areas that they have. They're usually like areas of sort of natural beauty or sort of that are protected for wildlife purposes. So they're going to make for good reference material. They're also places that people are going to be familiar with, maybe walking their dogs with. So people are going to have some associations with these areas. So I made a list of all of those. And I also sort of went through local magazines and try and find the views and the sort of subject material that's related to your area, even if it's just as a starting point. So, so for me last night, I decided I would go to up the river beside Ipswich is the River Orwell. So I thought I would go up the Orwell, and there is Rosa had recently heard of a place called Loom Pit Lake. So I've never seen Loom Pit Lake, so I thought we'd go up there and see if we could find it. So then you tried to make the consideration of when you're going to go, okay? And this is definitely the important bit. If you take anything from this lesson, it's this. Some parts of the day are probably going to give you better reference material than others, okay? And if it's possible and you're going out, I would recommend planning your trip to coincide with the golden hour, okay? So the golden hour is it's the hour before sunset, okay? So you can look it up on your phone, find out when sunset is. So in my case, it was 9:20, and then try and get out there for 8:20, and that's going to give you great light. Although, say, sometimes it will give you great light. It depends where your location is in relation to where the sun's setting, okay? So certain parts of the country are probably going to give you different results at different times of the year. But the golden hour, when the sun comes low like that, it tends to be infused with colour. So you're going to get oranges, yellows, lots more colour in the light, and that's going to make for more interesting painting. So as the golden hour is an hour before sunset, but also an hour after sunrise. Okay, so if you like to get up early, that would be another good time. Certainly here on the East Coast, if you want to see the sun coming up over the sea, then you need to be up early because it's going to come up that way. So there's the golden hour. There's also, and I found this out yesterday, something called the magic hour. So the magic hour is the hour after sunset, or the hour just preceding sunrise. And this is before the light's broken, but the sky is still taking on some of these oranges, maybe even rose, pinks, all that sort of stuff. You're going to get that in the magic hour. So that's another time to aim for. So my suggestion is to plan your trip and work out what time you're going to go. Now, as I say, when I got out there yesterday, we couldn't find how to get parking and get down to this place very easily. So we got down there really as the sun had pretty much gone down behind the horizon by that point. So I would adjust it. If I was going again tonight, I would go a little bit earlier. But I say you will sort of you'll find that out for your area. So so then you can just you go out either with your phone or your camera and try and take some pictures. So the main thing I would say here is so one of the things with art generally is you have to learn lots of different skills. So photography is a skill in its own right, and I certainly wouldn't claim to be an expert photographer. But one thing you need to be aware of is this problem of exposure. So what a lot of artists recommend is when you're going out, say you've got a scene, and I'll show you this in Photoshop with some of my reference, you need to expose for the darks and you need to expose for the lights. So often cameras have this, if you hold down the button, it will sort of adjust, find the focal point or find focus, and also adjust its exposure. So if you want to adjust for the darks, you point the camera down at something dark, press the button, bring it back up, and then press. Okay. If you want to expose for the lights, you turn it up to the brightest part of the sky, expose, bring it down to your where you're going to take, and then take the picture. So lots of cameras have that sort of facility, but you might need to look into how yours work. There's another thing called HDR, and a lot of phones have that now, and that will basically do the job for you. So you need to find if you have that setting. And I think there it uses technology to adjust the exposures for those different areas. Okay, because what you don't want is you don't want your sky to be white. That's when it's burnt out, and you don't want your darks to become solid black, because that's not going to make for good paintings. Okay, so you need to make sure you expose for all of those, and that's really one of the skills. Okay, then go and take some pictures, and this is where you're sort of developing the more intuitive skill. All I can say here is a lot of the stuff I've talked about with composition and design will apply to photography. So the rule of thirds, trying to create framing devices where you look through at things, radiating lines, perspective, all these sorts of things. The main thing I would say is try to keep your composition simple. Try to understand what your subject is, and then try to photograph it in a way that is relatively simple, uncluttered. That would be my suggestion anyway. Take more photographs than you think you need, and try different viewpoints. You know, get your camera down low or stand up on something, and try to get variety. Try to take photographs into the light and sort of lit in the other direction, all that sort of stuff. The more reference material you have, the more you're going to find that one good image to make a painting of. So people often don't take enough. So I would say take loads, because digital cameras, you can just delete all the ones you don't like afterwards. Okay, so what we'll do now is we will go into Photoshop, and I'll show you some of the ones I took last night, and try to give you some sort of hints as to how I might sort of tweak them before printing them off and developing a painting. Okay, so here we are. So these are some of the photographs I took from, so this is a little stretch by the River Orwell just towards Felixstowe. So these cranes you can see are down by the docks there at Felixstowe, and so we went for a walk. Now this one actually hasn't turned out too badly, so I picked out a few which I like. I like this one. I think it's the sort of thing that maybe I would turn it into a painting. One thing I like, which I don't know if you can see, is if we go down here, we've got these geese. So I thought they added quite a nice bit of visual interest, and also there is something about the geese which echoes the shape of the cranes. Now that's a little bit of a stretch maybe, but it's certainly it's a device that artists often use, which is to echo forms within a painting, like a cloud and a tree or something like that. So I think the fact that that echoes that is interesting. But overall this one is nice, and the lights and darks are quite nicely balanced. Okay, so that's a possible. Okay, so I'd leave that as it is for that one. So let's go on to another one. Okay, so this is definitely magic hour. So this is, the sun has set now, but we've still got some of that light in the sky. And this shows you the problem, is that I've exposed here for the sky, and it means that my trees and the land is all a bit dark. So, and if I took this to the studio and I ended up trying to just paint all this with black paint, it's not going to make for a good painting, I don't think. So what I really need to do is lighten those trees. Now, if we look at this one, no, that's similar. So one thing would be to, with my camera, I could have taken another few shots and exposed for the trees, but in your phones, you might be able to do this, which is you would create a copy. And if we do, most phones now will give you the option of editing. So you will need to discover this, or you can buy Photoshop elements, and that will allow you to do some of these things. So if we try the brightness, now if I brighten it a bit, I can sort of start to see the trees, okay? But what I'm going to do here is this thing called levels, and that darkens the darks. If I bring this up like that, okay, so there. And what that's done now is it's given me a bit more visual information. So I've got these cool greens now, and I can just make out some of the forms of these trees. So instead of it being a dense sort of dark area. So there's the picture as a whole. So the sky, through doing that, I've lost a little bit of the colour in the sky. So what I would be inclined to do is I can select the sky using this tool here. Okay, now I may not get it exactly, so we just get all these. And so I want to sort of reverse the effect here. I want to increase the colour in the sky. So I'll adjust the levels here. So like by bringing that down. Now there's a few little variations where I haven't selected these masks properly, but if I bring that down, then you see that's burnt out, that's down. So if I bring that down, then that's nice. So now I've got a bit more exposure in my trees and a bit more colour in the sky. Other things I like to do is once I've got a picture like this, then I might try various crops. So, you know, maybe with this sort of strong sort of zigzaggy shape, maybe even consider something a bit more portrait, let's say, something like that as a possibility. It's a bit noisy down at the with this water. I think maybe coming in a bit closer like that. So there's a few little variations there. Maybe playing with the color saturation. So again, all of this you can normally do on your phone. So look, that increases the color saturation. Okay, so something like that now might be a good basis for a painting. Okay, so I quite like this sort of, you know, there's some light in the ground, so we don't just have a dark mass. These could be edited, so I wouldn't necessarily have to include all of them. But that's the sort of thing I might do. And, you know, I'd carry on playing around with some of those adjustments. And this is much more in keeping this, although I've had to sort of play with the values a bit, this is much more captures the mood of the scene last night. In fact, all this whole area here might be bluer. So in fact, You see, what happens is I can't have the green and get the blues in the water. I can perhaps try saturation. So I'll make that bluer. So now we've got a bit more contrast between orange and blue, and so that might work nicely. Okay, so what might look a little bit artificial in your photographs is going to sort of read a lot more effectively in the sky. So that's one. So again, I'd sort of save that and print it off as a possible. I particularly like this sort of these violets in the distance. We've got these, all this colour. Colour creates a sort of focal point. Oh, I think that works really nicely. And also you'll notice the effect of the photograph squashes this all down. Okay, so and this is, it sort of compresses the space slightly. So if I was to grab this, okay, if I brought this up, okay, now say that's it, that's the reality, is it's all squashed. If I brought that up a bit, okay, now obviously my sky's all messed up there, but you can see what I've done is I've just extended it. And again, that's the sort of thing you might do in your painting. Although, say the camera's going to shrink all that down, but having this nice, you know, we talked about masses and having these this sort of depth, one dark thing over another. So this getting even smaller now. So maybe something like that, again, without all those sort of variations, that might make itself a nice painting. You see, it's quite simple. It's perhaps a slightly smaller format, so maybe that could be extended just a little bit further. So anyway, there's a few suggestions. Another photograph, again, you can see the same thing, that compression of space in the distance there, but I love this one in terms of this amazing sense of scale. Okay, so again, what's happened is the sky's become somewhat desaturated, so I would perhaps play with color saturation. So if we push that up, that already makes it a bit more, that's more like it was. Okay. Now all these darks have become, they're sort of burnt out in terms of being black. So again, playing with the levels in this case. So by bringing that up, I reveal a bit more of the detail in these darks. Now, whether I would want all that detail is another issue. Okay. But this is great. This sort of causeway creates this sort of lead in. So these like shapes in the mud, you can see a sunken boat here. They're interesting, but that again, you remember what I was talking about of like keep it simple. So you'd have to ask yourself, well, how much do I need here to tell the story? So the story is a causeway. So maybe that boat, that's quite a nice sort of foreground feature. Ooh. So maybe not quite as wide as that. Let's bring that down on the thirds. So you bring that down to the, so something like that. So that's quite a nice composition. Maybe that those shapes down there could be dulled down a bit. The sky is very bright. That's the only thing about it. So that might be the best. But there we go. That's not a bad one, is it? I think that's, you know, we've got some distance there. Again, that could all be, maybe I would just bring that up slightly. So instead of having it all shrunk. This is something that's important for landscape painting, okay? So I can do that to make more interest. I was pausing now. So by bringing that up, but by making it larger, it actually it does something to make the space, it's not quite as far away from us. So if we go back, okay, there it is, you see. So maybe that's better, but even if you don't do this in Photoshop, you can at least consider it, okay? But remember, if you make things in the distance big, they're going to seem nearer to you, okay? Same view there. Now, the point here with this one is that I exposed for the sky. So this gives me better color notes. So, whereas you can see this is all burnt out, we can't really see the sky. This is more the sort of thing with this nice real touch of yellow there. And this is more in keeping with the mood of the original. So, sometimes it would be a case of printing 2 off using 2. So there we go. So there's that one. Okay, so this is another one I liked, and we'll see the same sort of problems appearing here. So at the moment, the path, this is like this causeway. So this is where the lake here was formed. This is I say Loom Pit Lake. So this was formed when there were floods. I think it was in the 50s. There were very bad flooding up and down the Suffolk coast. And so this was a sort of breach of a field and has now created a lake. So I don't know whether they shored up this causeway or not, but people like to go fishing down there, but it's very difficult to access normally. So that creates this strong, great sense of perspective here, taking us into the distance, and then this tree with a bit of reflection. And I like this foreground tree. I thought this sort of, you see it points down, creates almost like a circular, almost like a spiral-like composition there. Same thing though is that the darks have been burnt out. We don't have any darks. Probably isn't burning out when they're darks, but whatever it is all we have is black, and that's not going to be good. So see if I can do the same thing here. We should be able to lighten these up. So by lightening that up, suddenly I reveal some of that detail. Okay, now we don't need a lot, but we need a bit, and you'll see what's happening is that if I keep the sky good, the objects go black. If I lighten it, I can see the objects, but the sky goes white. So this is the tension, and this is where we need these double exposures. So this is a sort of cheat really, but it still gives me the problem. So if I bring it up and I expose for the land like that, okay. I was having to think about it. Then I'd probably want to take this sky back down. So if I just sort of select that. Something like that. So you can see this is a real sort of balancing act between the colour and the lights and the darks. You can see there that's created that line where that's all been blacked out. So the other thing to do would be to print 2 off, okay? Um, so, and in terms of composition, let's have a look. With this one, there were a few variations I liked. Okay, so I liked some of the views of getting in close. So again, what I like is the causeway going into the distance, something like that. Again, the lights are all a bit pale, but I quite like that composition. I think that's got a bit of potential. So there we are. So there's a few photographs. I say that's just from last night, and to be honest with you, I just missed the golden hour, and also that location isn't. It would be probably better in the morning. In fact, if I'd been in there in the morning, the sun would have been coming up over those cranes, and that would have created all sorts of different effects. I'm not quite sure what time sunrise is now, but I say it would be quite early in the morning for me. So I think I'll try and stick with the evenings. So that's what I would like you to have a go with. I want you to really think about your photography. If you watch some extra videos, try to look up HDR and this ability to adjust your contrast for the lights and the darks. That might help, okay? And a lot of phones have that. So plan a few trips, maybe try and get a couple done if you've got the time. Try to get out there at the golden hour, or if you can't actually get out, if it's a bit late to be out at that time of night, then at least try to leave it as long as you can, and that way you're going to get the better effects. Okay. So get out there, take a few photographs, bring them home, edit them. And then what the project for this week is that I want you to then take those take those photographs and turn them into paintings, okay? And then hopefully on Friday we'll have some work we can look at, and I can give you some feedback. So I'm going to try and do the same. I'm going to take some of those, one of the ones that I've just shown you, and try and turn that into a painting. And try to bring it to life somewhat. I don't want all those burnt out, pure black and pure white. So I'm going to try and tweak them, and also try and capture some life and energy in them, as opposed to meticulously copying it out. So we'll have a look at that. Okay. So yeah, I hope you find that useful. Hope you enjoy that. Hope it opens up your photography. Certainly my experience last night was, I thought, why don't I come out at the golden hour more often? I've often gone out painting, and as I'm packing away, just as I'm packing up, it usually enters the golden hour. And I think, look at it, isn't it amazing? So actually targeting it and going out there deliberately, I think you'll be amazed, at how it transforms the world with that sort of golden light. So hope you enjoy that, and I will see you on Wednesday. I'll upload my demo, and on Friday I'll be here for some feedback. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thumbs up, always much appreciated, and I will see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.